Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of Kick Butt Heroines and Dark Romantic Worlds, and I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to an Amazon top 20 best-selling author known for her angsty billionaires and especially for her love of grumpy sunshine. We are talking to the one and only Elizabeth O'Rourke. How are you today?
I'm good.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you on because your books are amazing and everything about you is on brand, on point. And so when I knew I could get you on here, I was squealing with joy. And I kind of want to go back to the start of your career. What made you want to start writing in the first place, and how did you find publishing for the first time?
I think that a lot of us wanted to be authors, but just kind of seemed like a pipe dream because you'd hear about these people who got rejected 40 times for their amazing book. And I'm like, I know I'm not going to write an amazing book, so I'm going to get rejected 1,000 times and it's not worth it. But then, self-publishing came in and like right around 2013, I knew I was about to be going through a divorce. And I'm like, this is my last shot at having like enough time to write a book and just see what happens. And so I wrote it super fast and put it on Amazon, and it ended up doing okay. So it was sort of unexpected, and I refused to even tell my mother. Like, I didn't tell my mom anything about it because I just was like, oh, this is going to go so badly. And also because it was a romance and I didn't want her reading the sex scenes. And I just assumed that it wasn't going to, nothing was going to come of it. And then it worked out. So.
So when then did you start noticing the snowball effect in your career where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm an actual author. I have readers and demand. When was that point for you?
I'm not sure if I'm at that point yet. I think it was probably not really until the Devil series. Like, I think that it wasn't until the Devil series that I even had a book with 1,000 reviews.
Yeah.
Um, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, look at that. Like, oh, and it was like, and then all of a sudden things became more consistent. But yeah, it was pretty recent.
So how did you go then with that pressure? Because when you do have a series that takes off, everyone's like, that's exactly what we want. Yes, but when you're
Yeah.
in it, it's very intense and you have to level up very quickly. And it can be quite intimidating for the next book that you write as well. So, what were some of the things that I imagine you clumsily but quickly had to put in place so you could level up for that?
So, well, the funny thing is that I wrote A Deal with the Devil, and immediately after, my publicist was like, "Okay, so what's next?" I'm like, "I think I'm going to write vampires in the 1800s." And she's like, "Oh, no, 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 no. That's not how this is done." And see, like, I would probably still be kind of floundering in my career if she hadn't been like, "Dude, you can't just like go to change up your genres and your time periods." And like, I was just so dumb about it because I had done like a time travel and a this and military, and she's like, "That's not how this works." So I was like, oh crap. So yeah, I did have to like very quickly like come up with an idea for another book in the Devil series, like another billionaire grumpy. And I was lucky that I just like that an idea came to me. Like right now I'm kind of out of ideas, so I don't think I could do it again. But I feel like I just kind of got lucky that I was able to come up with three more really fast.
I love that you're going to go immediately to Vampire 1800s. I love
You
that.
love hearing how badly I would be doing on my own without advice.
No, but I think, I mean, there's so many things to learn, and especially if you're coming from 2013, completely different time as well. So the industry has changed so much to now. So I feel like perhaps back then we really could have gotten away with it, whereas now you definitely have to, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but the merit is if this genre is working for you, stay in this lane for a while. So it's a different shift, I think, sometimes as well.
And I mean, and it's unfortunate too, because sometimes you do want to write about vampires in the 1800s. And I had actually already written one of the books, and now I'm like, oh, I don't want to, I'm not going to publish it because like it's another series. And you write one of these books and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, now we need books about the other four brothers. And you're like, well, I can't do that because vampires in the 1800s doesn't make me any money. And I just did it for fun. And so that's the upside and the downside with a series is that once you write the first book, people want more of that series. But if that first book isn't paying your bills, then what do you do?
Would you ever consider possibly like going out on a pen name for paranormal, or are you quite settled where you are right now?
So, well, I did a paranormal series that doesn't sell. And so I'm like, well, I tried that and I really enjoyed it. Like I love that series. I'm still really happy with it. But yeah, and it's under like a name that's similar to my name, but a little different. And yeah, maybe when I retire, then I'll publish all of my like crazy stuff.
That's so good though. I love that. And sometimes it's just nice to have a palate cleanser as well, like writing. Like if you're writing very similar genres every time, you just need that little bit of a palate cleanser and you're like, wow, this is
Yeah,
so fun. Save.
exactly. And now I can't publish it, but yes.
Tell me about then the summer I first saw you. So that is your new release coming out. It is
Yeah.
book 5 in the summer series. So I'm a little bit curious as to what was different about this book. I'm not gonna lie, I was reading the blurb before. I was like, "Ooh, this is very much forbidden." So I want to chat with you. How'd you experience writing this one?
So this one was super fun for me. It's my favorite book in the series. And I think it's my favorite book. My editor, who's also based in Australia, was like, it's like the Devil series and the Summer series had a baby because it's kind of angsty, but it's also a little lighter and funnier. So it was really fun for me to write. The premise of the story is that Daisy is 21 years old. She's come home for the summer. Her mother has kind of lured her there under somewhat false pretenses, saying that she's going to go through this divorce, but she immediately gets back together with the awful stepfather. And Daisy's like, I'm not staying, but she's kind of stuck there for the summer. And so she goes to her uncle's best friend's house, beach house, which is supposed to be unoccupied because Harrison, who she's been in love with since she was a little girl, is theoretically down in LA with his new girlfriend. And then she comes to find out he's in the house. He's drunk off his ass, very surly, and is clearly keeping some secrets, but has been lying to everyone about this supposed girlfriend. And so she basically blackmails him into a place to stay. And of course, she has this huge crush on him, whereas he is like, okay, this is just unsettling because I've always known her as this bratty little kid. Now she's this like striking 21-year-old, and I'm living with her, and my best friend, her uncle, is going to kick my ass if he ever finds out that this has happened. And everyone is going to assume the wrong thing. And of course, he's kind of like increasingly wanting the wrong thing to happen. And she has wanted that from the start. So, so I guess, I mean, it's obviously it's forbidden and it's age gap, but it's not like there have been a bunch of people on Goodreads like, oh, this is unsettling, blah, blah, blah. But it's like an 11-year age difference. It's not like she's 12 and he's, 50. She's 21, he's 32. It's just so it's kind of like forbidden light. But it was really, I love when you have a book like that where it's like where the reason they can't be together is so firm. Because sometimes you write a book and you're like, they could probably get together pretty easily. So I love it makes it so much easier when there's it's like this absolutely cannot happen.
What does your writing process look like then? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you a 9 till 5? What's your process?
When my kids are not here, I am a like 6 a.m. to midnight. Like I do nothing but work. And then when they're here, like it's very like case in point, every 10 minutes somebody is coming in and asking. My grown children are coming in and being like, can you make me some blah blah blah? So, it's kind of like a week on, week off situation. But no, I just kind of I generally write like a lot of the banter first, because that's my favorite part. And then I kind of flesh it out and turn it into a story.
I mean, so are you a pantser then?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I
That's
mean, you know how this goes. Like you kind of have the order in your head. Like at a certain point, you're like, okay, it's 80%. We need our dark moment. And, you know, but
that
which one are you?
I'm a skeleton, so I'm predominantly pantser. But also same thing. I sort of like, oh, we need to get from A to B to C, and we know that this is going to happen around here. So you just know that your characters need to lead to those certain points. Um, I can't plot at all. Have you tried plotting?
I have, and like the product that I come out with is so boring. And it's the whole, and it feels boring to me. I'm like, oh my God, now I've got to write this scene where she talks to her mom. And it's just like, you're like, oh, I hate my job so much. So I don't want to hate what I do, right?
Do you find that as a pantser, there's a lot of things that you weren't expecting? Like you'll be like, oh, that's why that person's been doing this the whole time, and now it makes sense. Do you have moments like that?
I don't think I'm clever in that way. Like I wish that I was clever enough to be doing things like behind my own back, but I'm really not. I end up having to go back a lot and layer, like I'll be like, okay, there's not enough justification for, especially because I write grumpy guys. Like a guy can be grumpy, but he's got to have a reason for being grumpy. Like I don't like men in a book who are just assholes because that's just how they're born. Like I like them to have been made that way. So I will have to go back and layer in backstory when I'm feeling like something in one of them is not sufficient to explain the way they're behaving.
So, how long does it take you to write a book then?
Really, way too long. I I mean, it really does. It's really sad. I'm saying this because I have friends who write, like I don't know how fast you write, but like I have friends who can kick out a book in a month. And I can write a book fast, but then I'll spend like Deal with the Devil. I wrote most of the book in 5 days, and then I spent a year revising it. So that's kind of how.
I'm sorry, I am one of your friends. But with that said, as well, what I love about discussing on here too is how everyone's process is different. Like there is no right or wrong. The thing that I find is the most taxing for a lot of authors is the fact that when they feel like they have to have a process similar to such and such, that they're not writing quick enough or they're not publishing quick enough. And I feel like that's really what takes the joy and love out of this is that pressure where you feel like you're not doing enough. So I think when we get to a point where we're like, this is my process, I'm comfortable with it, and I still create really good books, then we're all winning.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and I would say that like this past year has been too much because I had the summer series and it was the first book came out in like April 2023 and this is the last book and it's the fifth. And I did have parts of them done before then. But for me, because I end up rewriting everything again and again and again. And I also like I'll write an entire book that's like single point of view and then make it dual. Or I'll write an entire book that's dual point of view and then I'll make it single. And so I'm constantly like, so it's such a, it's, for me, like, I don't feel like I really still found my process. Like I'm still too, like, like I had a book due last week and 5 days before it was due, I decided I don't like it as dual point of view. I'm taking his point of view out and rewriting the whole thing. Um, so yeah, I have
But
a terrible process.
but no, but I love that you're still exploring your process as well. It sounds like you're a bit of an intuitive writer as well, that you're just like, actually, this book is not yet finished. There's something off and I need to still work on it. Because I know plenty of authors who may be like, you know what, it's good enough, let's release it. Whereas you really honed down by the sounds of it until you were really satisfied with the story.
Yeah, and I think that was the other problem too, is that that especially because this time I had already it's sold it's I've sold the rights already to Piatkus in Australia and the UK. And so I had sold all 5 books before most of them were written. And then all of a sudden it was this additional pressure, to like, okay, now I actually have to do this. I can't just say like, oh, I hate this book. I'm not going to publish it after all, which is what I've done in the past. Like I've got this whole laptop full of books that I just don't like that I haven't published. And then all of a sudden it was the committing to it.
Our
So
readers are going crazy right now hearing this. They're like, what do you mean you have a bunch of books on there?
just like whoever is seeing that, like look at my worst book and then know that whatever I have on my laptop is way worse than that.
I imagine it's not as bad, but it's very interesting. Then how do you deal with handling multiple contracts? Because it can be very intimidating, especially when you first start stepping into like new contracts with say audio or publishing companies, especially because a lot of us aren't used to that type of jargon as well. So then you have, as you said, the element of pressure. So how do you juggle multiple contracts? What is your advice for authors who are stepping into that kind of zone in their career?
I mean, I feel like actually I'm like probably the worst person to talk to about it because for like what I decided after doing this 5 book thing is that I'm never selling a book until it's done again Because for me, the pressure was really debilitating. But I have friends who are like, oh yeah, I came up with this idea and I sold it and I have no idea what I'm going to write. And like everybody responds differently. That to me would just be my undoing. Like I would get so locked up by having made this promise that I would not be able to write because of it. So I guess you just have to know which person you are. And if you're like me and you know that just having promised something that you haven't created yet is gonna ruin you, then don't do it.
That's a 5 book series that you wrote pretty quickly. How did you go with avoiding burnout?
I don't think I did, to be honest. And and I'm sure you might have read the Becca Syme book about like Dear Writer, it's like it's basically about burnout, but something about quitting. And I think that that's something that I'm hoping to work on. This is another writer thing because I have so many friends who say this exact thing is once this book is done, I'm going to start doing these things. And then you never do. Like, I'm going to start working out and I'm going to meditate. And then as soon as the book is done, you're like, yeah, I don't have time for that. So, but I'm really like, there's this whole thing about, I think she has a thing about how you're like spending like your something out of your jar. And when you're writing and you've got to refill that, like all the things that you loved before that made you want to write, like reading other books, and a lot of writers will just give all that up because they're like, I don't have time to read, I don't have time to this. So I think it's really important to bring those things back in.
100%. And I agree with that because I'm pretty sure anyone who's been on here is familiar with burnout, which is so unfortunate as well. And a lot of us, I mean, maybe I'm speaking for myself, don't learn our lesson. We're like, yep,
Yeah.
this book's done. And then you just dive into the next one. You're just like, oh, I did that thing again. I didn't do the meditation like I promised. Kind of curious as to what your scheduling looks like. So, do you sort of have a 9 to 5? Do you do 3 hours on social media, 5 hours on writing, or are you just kind of go with the flow? I feel like this needs to be prioritized today.
For me, editing or writing feels easier than all the other stuff. So I tend to do way more of that, even then, like I know that I've got to do all the social media stuff, but I don't want to do it. So I just put it off until it's way too late. And then like I had to like pick out the stuff for like influencer boxes. And I should have done this months ago, but instead I'm like frantically calling like 2 weeks ago, paying double to get bags made and then driving like 2 hours away to pick them up and then ship them. And it's just because I put it all off because I don't like that part of the job. But I like to write. So my process is basically to just focus on writing until like somebody, my PA or my publicist is like, bro, you gotta move. And then I do the thing I don't want to do.
Have you considered then perhaps delegating those things? Because it's really difficult for one to release that type of control, but also finding the right person to trust in those decisions as well. So do you think you would consider delegation, although as much as it feels like ripping out teeth for you, you'll still keep it to yourself?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I really should. There are certain, you know what I mean? There are just like certain things that I don't know. I should. I don't know if I can.
You're like, we'll leave that to the backlist to make decisions on that one.
Yeah, on the next book, I'll do that. But you know what I mean? It's like I had a thing where it was like my whole like thing is I'm kind of sarcastic and like my characters are gonna have a little bit of an edge and they're a little bitchy, the females, and then like you hire somebody and like this is who you are and then they like do a thing of like kittens pushing each other over and like it's all sunshine and rainbows and you're like, oh my God, this is so not me. And so like that would be my fear is that like I would outsource like, okay, come up with some swag for this next book and then it's all like super cute and.
It's hard though, like, especially because you have to define who you are as a person. So we have to be conscious of branding, which is really difficult at the best of times. And some authors have it so on point, it's stunning. And then others, you're just like, who am I? What do I need to share? What do I need to be posting? Because the social media aspect especially is really hard and it's really time consuming. What what advice do you have when it comes to social media? I don't know now if you're the right person to ask because you
Every single question you ask, I'm like, oh, I'm wrong. Oh no, I'm terrible at that. I'm not sure what I can offer advice on.
you're just going to be like, don't do it.
Yeah. I don't, the funny thing is it was only with my last release that I've met with somebody who's kind of like an Instagram specialist. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be posting. And she's like, the month before your release, every single day you should be posting about your book. And I was like, oh, and I like looked at my like last 3 releases and I had posted about them like once. I mean, I feel like I'm still learning. I don't know. I would, that is something that I would love to outsource. But
I feel like
yeah.
I should be writing down a list for you on the side of things that you
Yes, please. I think I should have been interviewing you. What should I do to?
all I'm hearing is outsource delegation, but I love outsourcing and delegation because honestly, I think that's the tricky part is like when you get to a certain point in your career, really understanding what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I know a lot of us really try to constantly focus on that weakness. And if you don't enjoy it, just don't do it because we're doing so much already. So I think delegation for certain things is a really positive thing.
But it's like anytime you delegate, you're also giving something up, right? Like for a while, like I had delegated some of the social media stuff, but then I realized that like I wasn't actually seeing, like somebody would write this beautiful post about like a book of mine or this or that, and I wouldn't have seen it. And then I'd meet them at a signing and they'd be like, I was the one who did this and I wouldn't have known. And it's just like you feel crappy when that happens. So it's like you don't want to have to give these things up either. But yeah.
I agree with that because it is that element of connection as well, isn't it? So it does make it a bit trickier. And I know authors who are just like, no, I'll always be doing that or this and that. And that's fine. Like, just this is for those who really, really hate or can't stand or just like don't want to touch social media. I think that's best. And then perhaps you can always organize with the person who is posting on your behalf. If there's really like standout, posts and things like that, they can still like let you know about them so you can see those as
Yeah.
well. How
That's
do you go at book signings actually? I'm kind of curious. Like, do you love them?
this is so bad. I probably shouldn't even be saying this. I have to take like Adderall to like, I'm such an introvert that I'm like just very shy and I'm a little awkward. And I get these signings, and they're very overwhelming and you've got to be really bubbly. And you're just like, I'm so overwhelmed right now that I'm like medicated in order to like go in public. So that's how I am at signings.
I love that though. Like so you and me are a little bit opposite on this spectrum because I am like a kid on Christmas Day at these events. I am that bubbly person. I just energize. I'm like, you and you and you and you will be friends and it's great. Whereas I do have a lot of introverted friends as well. So it's really interesting, I think, especially for them because they don't necessarily thrive in that energy. It's uncomfortable for them, but they're still there because they love the connection, they love the experience, they love meeting their readers. And I wonder, it's probably a very similar, just talking to you, I can tell you're very humble as well. So it must be a very mind blowing experience as well when you have these readers who have fallen in love with your work so much and you're just like, I'm just a person. I'm just medicated right now. Like I don't know what's happening. Is it overwhelming for you?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. And you always want to be like, who's a much better writer is, like I can name 5 people who have written much better books that, like these people come up and you're like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing. And I do enjoy the signings, but yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, I'm just like, I never can sleep. I'm just like, I'm too wired from the whole, and I need like a week to just come down off of it.
I can just imagine you right now, like that night in the hotel, like just staring at the ceiling, like trying to process what's just happened.
At the last night, this is so bad. The last night of book, now I'm telling everybody about my like medication problem. So I was taking Ambien every time at Book Bonanza because I couldn't sleep. And by the last night of Book Bonanza, I took like a full dose of Ambien, and I normally only take a half if I'm going to take it. Took a full dose, nothing. I still couldn't sleep. I got up at like 3 in the morning and like rebooked my ticket and just like I was not supposed to leave Dallas until like 7, and I got in an earlier flight, and I'm like, I'm clearly just never falling asleep again. I'm going home. So
Did you get to sleep as soon as you got home though?
yes, once I
Okay,
got home.
okay, amazing. That's what counts. You were talking about before, like Becca Symes, love her, absolutely adore her and her work. So, what resources have you found that's really assisted you in the last couple of years, like, say, podcasts or, books or people such as Becca Symes? What's really helped you?
I mean, for me, the most helpful thing has just been like other authors and author friends, because they're the ones who know the exact, like, it's not like, you can go and you can get this very generic advice that like is for like, mystery writers and this and this. But like, if you're a contemporary romance author, it's like a really specific, like, this is what you need to do with your ads. This is what's going to get you a better click-through rate. This is, you know what I mean? And so that, and it's also just having people who understand the exact pain of like, you haven't even written a book yet and someone on Goodreads has given it a 1-star review. And you're like, dude, I don't even know what the book's about. And you're already like, you're already tanking it. You know what I mean? So I think for me, that's actually been the most helpful. And I need to get better about, like, I'm one of those people who signs up for a bunch of courses and then never takes the course. So
You're a chaotic mess.
I know, right? Signed up for like 6 courses in the past year and I haven't taken any of them.
Well, I feel like a lot of us do this as well. So I'm just like, oh, we have the intention to do it, but then we remember that we're really busy and we don't have time for it yet until the next book that we plan to do the course, and then it goes to the
Yeah,
waste.
I do feel like my life is about to, like, I'm not going to stay as messy. Like, this is the end of the 5-book series, and I've not committed to anything. So, okay. But
I I feel like this might be your process.
yeah, this might be.
I think we're going to go through the stages. You're in denial now, but when you come to
Right.
what then is your process when you're releasing a new book, such as now? What are the top three things that you make sure that you always have to do? Is it advertising like Facebook or Amazon? Is it newsletters, social media? What is it that you prioritize?
So for me, I really don't do any TikTok. Like, that was one of those, like, when you're talking about like delegating or like cutting stuff out. And for me, it was just like TikTok was too overwhelming. And it's also for me, it's a time sink. Because if I go into TikTok, all of a sudden 3 hours have passed and I've been watching makeup videos for, and getting no work done. So I've just kind of like, I don't allow myself to go on TikTok and I rule it out. I have like an ads person. So for me, it's Facebook ads, newsletter swaps. Um, it's really those two, and then Instagram, but it's mostly Facebook ads, and Amazon ads never work for me, but,
Yeah.
um,
Were you originally doing your own Facebook ads? And then that was one of the things where you're like, actually, this is like taking a long time and I'm going to delegate this out.
So I'm sure you won't be shocked by this, having had this conversation with me, but I was a person who would create a Facebook ad and like set like a fairly expensive budget and then walk away and never check that out again. And like 4 months later, I would have spent like thousands of dollars on this ad that had like the worst click-through rate. It was like, and you know how they give you like a relevant score and it's like, your ad is terrible. It was like, I should have cut this ad off months ago, but instead I've just been throwing my money to Facebook. So I'm much better off with somebody else.
I'm so glad that you have an agent and a peer.
Right.
Like they are the guiding rails for you.
Yes.
What advice do you have for authors when it comes to writing captivating romance? What have you found that's really worked for you? Like, do you know when you go in, do you already know your tropes or are you discovering it as you go?
So yeah, I generally kind of know like the primary trope. Like, I know that it's like they dated as teenagers and she's mad at him now for something he did. Like, I know that much. I'm not somebody who will, I'm not like, okay, Step Brothers is hot and age gap is hot, so he's going to be a much older stepbrother. Like I can't do it like that. I've just got to be really intrigued by the premise myself, or by like this chemistry I can imagine between the couple. But I mean, all the advice I have is the advice that I've gotten from books. But my favorite, like I like the concept of the mirror moment, which I think the guy's, is his name James Donaldson? He's written I think the book he wrote Superstructure, and he also, I think it's called The Mirror Moment. But basically he says, if you look at any movie and you go to the 50% point, almost exactly the 50% point, there is a moment when the main character either is looking in a mirror, or like basically it's often looking in a mirror, looking in the glass. And it's the decision point where he's got to be like, if I've got to face this, and it's like either psychological death or real death. And so I will do that. Like I'll even go into my books and I'll tweak so that it's like, right, if it's a 300-page book, I like 150, I want that to be like the do or die moment when she's like, am I going to do this? Am I jumping? I'm jumping. And I don't know. I like holding myself to that. And then I do like the whole, like, there's that thing about the book doesn't start when you are laying the wood, it's when you light the match. Because for me as a reader, I hate when there's like 4 chapters of her hanging out with her friends,
Yeah.
and like, like I want it happening within a page or two. Yeah.
I actually had never heard of the mirror concept, so thank you for sharing that. That's quite enlightening, but it makes sense as well because as you say it, I'm like, yeah, no, you're right. I can see that now. So that's a really interesting. I love that you're always like, it must be on page 150. I will get this every time. I love that you're doing that for yourself as well. That's fun.
Well, but the thing is that I think that readers, like, I think that people have almost an intuitive sense of where these moments are supposed to come, right? And so you don't realize it when you're reading it, but when the moments don't fall at the right place, you sense it. You know what I mean? It's almost like if you've ever created a video for Instagram or whatever, you can kind of sense like, or for TikTok, like the caption is here, and like readers have a sense of exactly where that caption's supposed to be. And if it's off, they won't click on they don't want to keep watching it. And they don't even know that that's why they've done it. But if there's the tiniest little thing, they have a sense of how things are supposed to flow. And I think that's one of those things.
I know that we've labeled you as a chaotic mess, but in the kindest way, but you're actually very intricate as well. You're very attention to detail, aren't you? I mean, I'm
Um,
questioning
yeah.
this, but it's just what I'm noticing as we're interviewing. And I imagine that's why, very much so, you write phenomenal books as well, because you're very much to the fine detail.
Yeah, with my books detailed, like everything else in my life, not at all. But
I'm like, I can just see it now. I'm like, it's very interesting. It's really nice to hear, like, as to how much you really do, like, just really dig into every aspect of your book. It's really, really nice because, as I said, like, not every author necessarily does that. So I think that's what makes you distinctly unique as well. Thanks. I want to talk. What has been for you the most amazing moment? You obviously Amazon top 20 best-selling author, which is a huge feat, and I'd love to hear about when that happened. But I'd also like to know what was the most sentimental moment for you so far in your career.
I think it's still coming, and it'll be the moment when my children actually acknowledge that what I'm doing is cool. And that a moment it's not anywhere near right now. In fact, I took my kids to a signing in London, and they're like, wow, these other authors are way more popular than you, mom. And I'm like, like I was next to Monica Murphy, and they had set me up with like the rope, like to make people queue. And they pulled my rope away because she was so much more popular. And my kids are like, oh, that's so embarrassing. And I'm like, I so regret having brought you. But there have been a couple moments, but I think especially like when an author that you regard as like, you're like, oh my God, she's so big. Like Abby Glines came up, and like when Abby Glines messaged me, I was like, oh my God, Abby Glines messaged me. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. That's kind of crazy.
It's kind of a weird sense of recognition almost as well, because like you're working hard and you can see all the amazing, like you have tens of thousands of reviews, so you are, well, I'll say it for you, I can brag for you, you are well loved. And so I think it's also a very flattering moment when you do have authors who you've really not necessarily idolized, but you're just like, you're an amazing person, and I can't wait to be sitting by your side as an equal. And we are always as equals, but it's like almost a goal. So when you get that recognition, it's really, I think, heartfelt almost, because you're like, you know who I am? Am I a
It's
cool kid now?
it's just like it's more just like dumbfounding. You're like, how did this happen? And like, but yeah, there have been a couple moments like that. Or at Book Bonanza, like all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I'm talking to this woman. It turns out she's E.L. James, and I'm like, you know what I mean? You're just like, I was a medical writer. I was writing books about brochures about amniocentesis, and now I'm like sitting across from E.L. James. Like, how does that happen?
What do you think it takes to get your kids' approval? Like, are we needing a TV show? Are we needing movies? Like, what do you think? What do you think that point is?
I think I would have to be like in the NFL. I've got two sons. So basically I served frozen yogurt to a professional football player when I was in college, and my kids are impressed by that. But yeah, I don't know.
I
I
feel
don't
like
know.
this is a pressure you have to release. I feel like
Just
just cut
give
that,
up.
cut your losses.
Yeah.
What has been the most surprising thing for you in the industry so far?
I think actually the most surprising thing, like when I was first starting out, like I wasn't on Facebook, I didn't do any of this stuff, but I guess my impression was that it was like super, that you would be very competitive with everyone. And like the other authors, like contemporary romance authors, are wonderful. Like they are such cheerleaders, they're so supportive. And like with a few rare exceptions, they're people that I would like want to be like best friends with, that they lived in my town. And that's the other strange thing, is that you're like, wow, I found this whole community of people who are so much like me. We all have these like similarities, which I think is what led us to become writers. And that's been, and also just like how nice, how lovely the community can be. Like
Yeah.
people in your book group and people on Instagram. I'm like, wow, like I'm generally kind of a downer and a little bit of a pessimist. I'm like, all these people are so cheerful and supportive. And I feel like I've learned from them too. Like I have one author friend who is like just a ray of sunshine. And I feel like I'm learning from her, like, okay, that's a much more pleasant way to be than the way I am.
I agree with you. Like, I love that we are very empowered in the sense that we can create that community around us. And you look at it like prior to going into this industry, and there may be a select few people that you're like, oh, I feel like you kind of understand me and my quirkiness. Whereas, like, when you step into this, we're all here for the same love of the same thing. It's just different little tribes and different little genres, and it's really, really nice.
Yeah. And it's also nice that like we all have this common language. Like when you're talking to your like non-author friends, you can't just throw out a term like, the dark moment, or, the dubious consent, and have them know what you're talking about. And or casually reference like stepbrother trope. And so it's nice to have like all these friends who have this very common language with you.
What have you found to be your most challenging part of your career and so far your greatest accomplishment?
Oh gosh. I think probably the most challenging part is just dealing with like the pressure of, especially now, like people want you to be publishing every couple of months. And that's not for me. That wouldn't be, if I could, I would do like once a year. And it's hard to pull that off unless you're huge. Um, so that's the hardest thing for me. My greatest accomplishments would just be like the books that I'm proudest of. And they're not necessarily the books that everybody else likes, but like when I like at the end of my life, I'm going to be like, I'm really happy that I wrote that book. Like even if it didn't sell, like, you know,
Do you think that you write bits of yourself in every book as well? Do you think the reason why perhaps you're inclined more towards a certain book characters besides the banter, because you're hilarious? I love banter for that reason. When people are like, the banter was great, I'm like, are you telling me I'm funny? But do you feel like you sprinkle a little bit of yourself and your life experiences in every book you write as well?
Yeah, I almost with like only like two or three exceptions, I feel like there's like a lot of me and like it's like each of them is like some like in some way like a little bit of a version of me, except that they're like, like model good looking and they've never struggled with their weight and they're like, "Oh, I'm too thin. I need to eat more." And I'm like, "I've never had that problem." But but aside from that and also the dating a really hot guy, a lot of it is me. So, yeah.
So, what would you say then is the goal that you're chasing? What is the dream that you're after? The bigger, the better.
Oh, I guess movie, right? Like that would be pretty cool.
I'm excited for it. I think I definitely know it's going to happen. So, I'm ready to get the popcorn. I'm just really praying for you that your sons are going to be equally as impressed as all your readers are going to be.
They already know they won't be.
I do have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So basically, I've lit a candle, I've created ambience, but basically, what it is five rapid questions. Are you ready?
Yep.
Yeah. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Oh, see, I don't know. I have a lot of clumsy moments. You know what? I tripped on an acorn and broke my ankle.
Really?
Yeah. I've got really weird, like I break my ankles all the time, but I've got really flexible ankles. And
Oh,
so I stepped on an acorn weird, my ankle just went crack. That's pretty clumsy.
oh my goodness. Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate that. That's something you would read in a book.
Yeah, you'd be like, no one's that clumsy. I am.
Refer to Elizabeth. What are the three words that best describe you?
Introverted. I don't know, they're all negative. Introverted. I'm like thinking like awkward. I don't know, man. Uh, Not a good decision, not a good person to think on their feet, obviously. I don't know. I think I'm funny.
Yeah,
Funny, introverted, dreamer.
I love those. They're not negative at all. What is the song that best describes you?
Oh man. No more speed dating. This is terrible. The
I
song
love asking this question because it ruins everybody. I love it. Do you have a favorite like band or artist?
I have a couple, but I don't know. My kids say that all the music I listen to sounds like it's like in a movie about the apocalypse, like it's all like dark and brooding. I don't Oh my God, I'm gonna have to pass. I don't know.
Find a dark and brooding theme song that's okay. And it matches your grumpy sunshine.
Yes, yes.
You've got the brains going, you're like, all right, what am I gonna write in
Yeah.
this scene? What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
Um, I'm a good speller. That's a really lame skill.
But
I,
that's
I went to I went to my state spelling bee.
that's cool.
Yeah, no. Um, Actually super lame. I don't know if I have any. Yeah, that's about it.
I mean, I really admire that because like my spelling and grammar is terrible. My editor will tell you. So like you are the holy grail for me right now. Just like
Okay.
amazing. Who has been, and you can only choose one character, who has been your favorite character to write and why?
Oh, actually, it's probably Daisy from this book. Just because she was like, when I'm writing a character who's kind of fun and joyful, I'm like happy when I'm writing her because you kind of inhabit that character's like spirit when you're writing. So, she was fun and she was just so blunt, and yeah, and she was just funny and she just said whatever she wanted to say.
I love those that have no filter. They're fun to write because you're just like, you can't say that, but you can.
Yes, exactly. Like stuff that you couldn't say in real life, you can have your character say, and that's fun.
I have had so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on today and let us know what's coming up. What do we need to be on the lookout for? And most importantly, where do we find you?
Okay, so The Summer I First Saw You comes out on Thursday everywhere. And you can find me on Instagram at Elizabeth Their Work and Facebook, same place.
Yay! I'm so excited for this one. I'm not gonna lie. When I read the blurb, I was like, "Oh, that's definitely a high stakes forbidden romance," and that sounds like something I want to devour. So I'm ready for it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I botched your speed dating thing, but
It's fine. We can practice. It's all right. These are the ones that I remember. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna love you and leave you, but we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
bye. Thank you.